Why did the commander's eyes linger on her hands, as if doubting she belonged there at all? The armory was quiet, empty except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Emma Carson sat alone at the workbench, the massive Barrett .50 caliber rifle disassembled in front of her like an intricate puzzle only she seemed to understand. Her fingers moved with a surgeon's care. Every pin, every spring, every polished surface mattered. She knew what failure could cost. A malfunction wasn't just a defect in steel and oil. It could mean someone's son didn't come home. Someone's daughter never saw her family again. Emma had been cleaning rifles since she was 12. At 26, she carried that childhood obsession into a profession no one had expected her to choose. A civilian, yes, but the kind of civilian the military called when their most dangerous tools needed perfect hands. And yet, no matter how steady her work, there was always someone who looked at her and saw only doubt. The barrel gleamed under the lights as she guided a cloth through its length, counting each pass with silent discipline. Her grandfather had drilled this into her. A weapon doesn't forgive carelessness, Emma. Respect it, or it will shame you. She respected it, maybe more than most soldiers did. That was when she felt it, a shadow stretching across her workspace. She looked up, and the quiet was no longer hers alone. A man stood there, weathered face, civilian clothes that didn't quite disguise the way he carried himself, spine straight, eyes hard with decades of experience. He didn't speak at first. He just watched, studying not just her technique but something deeper, as if the rhythm of her hands revealed more than the steel under them. "You handle that Barrett like you built it yourself," he said finally. His voice was gravel and memory, carrying weight that couldn't be faked. Emma paused, resting the cleaning rod on the bench. She met his eyes without flinching. "Every weapon has its own personality," she answered. "You don't just clean it, you listen. You learn what it needs to perform at its best." Something flickered in the man's eyes, recognition, maybe even respect. He extended a hand. "Lieutenant Colonel Frank Miller, retired, technical advisor now." "Emma Carson," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Civilian contractor." His gaze dropped to the rifle's bolt carrier group, spotless under the light. "Most technicians miss the carbon in the back channel. You didn't." He kept his hands behind his back, careful not to disturb her process. That restraint told her more about him than his introduction. But his next words caught her off guard. "Carson," he repeated. "You wouldn't be David Carson's granddaughter, would you?" Her hand stilled. "You knew him." "Knew him?" A rare smile broke his face. "We served together in Desert Storm. Best marksman I ever met. He could make that Barrett sing." Emma swallowed against the sudden swell of pride and ache. Her grandfather had died 5 years ago. The man who had taught her everything, who had given her weekends at the range instead of childhood games, was gone. And yet here was someone who spoke of him as if he just left the room. "He taught me everything I know," she said quietly. Before Miller could respond, the armory doors swung open. The presence that filled the room was impossible to ignore. Tall, sharp-eyed, every detail of his uniform precise. Commander Robert Anderson of the Navy SEALs. 6 feet of authority and skepticism wrapped into one. His gaze moved Miller. "Emma," the disassembled Barrett, he nodded to Miller. "Colonel," then to Emma, "and you must be our civilian contractor." That word again, civilian, waited, doubtful. Emma stood, meeting his stare evenly. "I'm handling the maintenance on your team's precision rifles." Anderson stepped closer, eyes sweeping over the weapon's parts like a predator inspecting territory. "That's a weapon that requires more than technical knowledge. It requires combat experience." He turned to Miller. "Wouldn't you agree?" Miller's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. "Experience comes in many forms, Commander. Miss Carson has a lineage you might respect. She's David Carson's granddaughter." A flicker passed through Anderson's eyes. Recognition, surprise, maybe even discomfort. But it hardened quickly into skepticism again. He picked up the Barrett's bolt carrier, examining it. "Technical skill is one thing," he said, "but these rifles don't live on benches. They live in war. My men stake their lives on them. I need to know you understand that reality." Emma kept her face calm, though the sting burned. "I've been maintaining precision rifles for 4 years, Commander. Special operations units. I know what's at stake every time one of these is fired." His silence stretched like a test. Then, finally, he set the part down and fixed her with an assessing stare. "Tomorrow, 700, the range. 5 shots, 1,000 yards. I want to see what David Carson taught his granddaughter." And with that he turned away. "Colonel, a word." Miller gave her a small nod, a reassurance. "Don't let him under your skin. He's hard on everyone." Emma watched them leave, her jaw set. She had faced skepticism before. Every time she had answered with her work. Tomorrow would be no different. Or so she thought. The morning was still when Emma arrived at the range. Cool air. Silence broken only by the crunch of boots on gravel. She carried her spotting scope and rangefinder in a plain case, walking with the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove, even if her stomach told her otherwise. The SEAL team was already there, clustered like wolves. She caught the glances. Civilian, outsider, doubt. She'd seen it before, but that didn't make it sting less. Anderson stood at the firing lane, arms crossed. "Miss Carson," he greeted with a curt nod. He gestured to the waiting Barrett. 1,000 yards, 5 shots, show us." Emma approached the weapon, her eyes sweeping over it in seconds. "Windage is off by 3 clicks." One of the SEALs snorted. "Barely a breeze, ma'am, textbook setup." She didn't look up. "That's not wind, that's physics. Coriolis effect, eastward firing this latitude. You'll miss by inches if you don't compensate." The snort died into silence. She adjusted the scope, then settled behind the rifle. Breathe, aim, squeeze. The Barrett roared, the recoil rolling through her body like thunder. Without waiting for acknowledgement, she cycled the bolt and fired again. And again. 5 shots in steady rhythm, no hesitation, no waste. She stood, stepping back. Anderson lowered his binoculars, his expression unreadable. "Range report," he called. The reply came crackling over the radio. 5 shots, all center mass, grouping under 2 inches. "That's exceptional, sir." The murmurs spread among the SEALs. Miller's faint smile said everything. "David would be proud," he whispered to Emma. Anderson studied her, his skepticism softened but not gone. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Emma's voice was steady. "My grandfather believed you couldn't understand a weapon unless you could use it. He started teaching me at 12. We spent weekends at the range." Anderson nodded slowly, respect creeping in. "Impressive, but the range isn't combat. Don't mistake one for the other." Emma met his eyes. I'm not a soldier, Commander. I don't pretend to understand combat, but I do understand these weapons inside and out, and that's what you brought me here for." Before he could reply, his radio erupted. Urgent, sharp, he listened, his face hardening. "We need to cut this short. Colonel Miller, Command Center. Miss Carson, you too. Your skills may be relevant." The briefing room was alive with tension. Screens flickered with satellite images of a mountainous compound. Analysts whispered, the air thick with something Emma hadn't expected: fear. Anderson gestured to the screens. "Shadow Cell, former Russian special forces, dormant for years. They're active again, and they're using weapons that shouldn't exist." Emma leaned forward. On the screen, diagrams of modified Barrett systems appeared. Ammunition fragments, ballistic models. "These aren't ours," one analyst said, "but they're built on our designs. American precision mixed with Soviet brutality." Miller's face went rigid. "I've seen this before. 1989, Afghanistan. A weapons engineer we called the Professor. He was obsessed with hybrid sniper systems." Anderson pointed to the compound on the screen. Intelligence suggests he's alive, developing new generations of these weapons, and Shadow Cell is already using them. Then his gaze turned to Emma, cold, direct. Colonel Miller recommends you. We need someone who doesn't think like the rest of us, someone who can see what others miss, someone who understands these weapons at their core. Emma felt every eye on her. Her chest tightened. Why her? Why not a dozen cleared military engineers? Miller answered what she couldn't. Because she's David Carson's granddaughter, and because she sees what the rest of us don't. The silence in the room was heavy. Anderson's voice cut through it. This is voluntary, Miss Carson, but make no mistake. If you accept, this is no longer about cleaning rifles. This is about stepping into a war most civilians never even know exists. Shadow Cell is planning something far larger than assassinations, and if we fail to stop them, countless lives will pay the price. Emma's throat was dry. She thought of her grandfather, of the journal he had left her, pages filled with numbers, formulas, quiet lessons about responsibility. She thought of the rifle gleaming under the armory lights, and she thought of Anderson's doubt, still etched in his eyes. She didn't answer yet, not here, not now. But in her chest, something had already begun to harden into resolve. Why hadn't her grandfather ever spoken of Afghanistan? The question lingered like smoke as Emma left the command center. The corridors of Fort Bragg felt colder now, filled with shadows that weren't there before. She had grown up believing David Carson was a quiet man who loved rifles and responsibility, a grandfather who left her notebooks filled with formulas and ballistic sketches, who insisted discipline was love in its truest form. But Anderson and Miller had just painted him in another light, a soldier in places he never mentioned, facing enemies she had never imagined. Emma followed Miller through the base until they reached the small, nearly empty coffee shop. He chose a corner booth where he could see both entrances, a habit she recognized from her grandfather. Old soldiers didn't sit with their backs to the door. Afghanistan, 1989, Miller began, his voice low, words heavy with memory. The Soviets were leaving, but not all of them. Some stayed behind, guarding research that never made it to Moscow. Your grandfather and I were part of a team sent to stop their work from falling into the wrong hands. Emma leaned forward, and this Professor Petrov. Viktor Petrov, Miller said, nodding grimly. Weapons engineer, brilliant, dangerous. He had a vision merge American precision with Soviet stopping power. If he succeeded, it would have rewritten the battlefield. David and I were tasked with preventing that. Emma studied him. My grandfather never told me any of this, not one word. Miller sighed. He wouldn't have. David carried things quietly, but you need to know. We intercepted a transfer in the mountains. Ambush. Half our team dead before we hit the ground. I was captured. He rolled up his sleeve, showing a web of scars, old but unmistakable. Petrov interrogated me for 3 days, clinical, cold. He wanted everything we knew about American systems, but your grandfather, Miller's eyes softened. He came for me, alone, tracked us to a Soviet research facility, rescued me, took Petrov's arm with a shot no one else could have made. Emma's breath caught. She had grown up hearing fragments of her grandfather's skill, but never this. Never the kind of story that blurred the line between myth and truth. And Petrov, she asked. He escaped, disappeared when the Soviet Union fell. Everyone thought he was dead. I never believed it. Miller's eyes darkened. 2 years later, after Desert Storm, your grandfather died. Officially, training accident. Unofficially, a new Barrett prototype vanished the same week. I've always believed Petrov arranged it. Emma's chest tightened. 15 years old. That was how old she had been when she buried her grandfather. She had believed the official story, believed he'd gone out doing what he loved. Now, Miller was suggesting he had been murdered. Her hands shook against her coffee cup. Why hasn't anyone pursued this? Because in '92 the Cold War was over. Washington wanted to move forward. Afghanistan, Iraq, terror cells, those became priorities. Without proof, David's death was written off as an accident. Emma stared at the table, anger mixed with grief in her throat, choking her. The thought that her grandfather, the man who raised her like his own child, had been silenced by the same enemy now resurfacing made her blood burn. Before she could answer, Miller slid a folded envelope across the table. Yellowed paper, faded handwriting, her grandfather. 2 days before his death, Miller said softly, he sent me this. Emma unfolded it with trembling hands. Frank, something isn't right with the Barrett program. The observer from Bratislava knows too much. I recognize design elements in the prototype Petrov's signature. I think he's here. Watch your back. David. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. A warning, a confession, a clue. Her grandfather hadn't just been killed in an accident. He had been silenced. She folded the letter carefully, as if afraid it would disintegrate in her hands. Why show me this now? Because Petrov is alive, Miller said. Shadow Cell's weapons bear his design, and if we don't stop him, he'll finish what he started 30 years ago. Emma, this is bigger than contracts and rifles. This is your family's unfinished war. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Her quarters felt too quiet, the air too still. She opened the leather-bound journal her grandfather had left her. Pages of notes, firing calculations, sketches of scope mounts, maintenance procedures, the details she had memorized years ago. But in the back, a page she had always overlooked caught her eye. A fragment written in careful script. In the shadow of mountains where eagles dare not fly, truth hides in plain sight beneath a foreign sky. What seems an accident of fate is often designed, disguised in sedate. Remember, the best shot is the one no one sees coming. Beneath the poem, a date, April 17, 1989, the very week Miller had described. Emma traced the words with her finger. Her grandfather had left her a code, a truth hidden in plain sight. Her phone buzzed, shattering the silence. A news alert. Brussels, a NATO security conference. Attacked by impossible shots taken from extreme range. Defensive systems bypassed as if they weren't even there. Shadow Cell had struck again. Emma's decision crystallized in that moment. This wasn't about contracts. This wasn't even about her grandfather anymore. This was about stopping a man who believed war was a laboratory and human lives were experiments. She dialed Miller. He answered on the first ring. I'm in, she said. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. But I want everything. No redactions, no more secrets. There was a pause, then his gravel voice answered. Be at the command center at 700. I'll tell you what I know. The desert sun hit like a hammer when Emma stepped off the transport the next afternoon. Nevada stretched flat and endless. The mountains jagged against the horizon. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. Perfect camouflage for a facility the government claimed didn't exist. Welcome to Sandstone, Miller said, gesturing at the low structures ahead, most of them buried into the rock. Emma adjusted the strap of her equipment bag. She had left her life behind in storage lockers and locked databases. For the next weeks, maybe longer, she would be a ghost. Commander Anderson met them at the base of the stairs. Carson, Miller, this way. They drove through layers of checkpoints until the desert swallowed them whole, the compound revealing itself only at the last moment, a fortress built into stone. Inside, the contrast was stark. Humming electronics, polished glass, classified corridors filled with people who barely glanced at her. Anderson led them into a conference room where 4 others waited. Michael Wilson, Anderson said, SEAL team lead, a tall man with arms folded, eyes cold. James Carter, Delta, survival specialist. An older soldier, scars mapping his forearms, gave her a respectful nod. Diane Martinez, technology, sharp-eyed, tablet in hand, she smiled faintly. And Scott Brooks, precision marksman, a man barely in his 30s, confident, watchful. His eyes assessed Emma as if she were a weapon he didn't trust. "And this is Emma Carson," Anderson finished. "Weapons specialist. She'll be working with us on the shadow cell systems." Wilson frowned. "With respect, Commander, we're an operational team, not a research group. How exactly does a civilian contractor fit into this?" Before Anderson could speak, Miller cut in. "She's David Carson's granddaughter." The silence was immediate. Carter's eyebrows rose. "The Desert Storm sniper, the one who hit the Republican Guard command post at a mile." "The same," Miller confirmed. Brooks scoffed quietly. "Range shooting isn't combat shooting." Emma met his gaze. Calm, controlled. "I'm not here to compete. I'm here to help stop weapons already killing American operatives. Weapons designed by the man who murdered my grandfather." The room went still at that revelation. Anderson cleared his throat. "That's enough. We brief in 5 minutes." The screen lit up with satellite imagery. The Caucasus Mountains. A compound dug into stone. Shadow Cell's home. Diane pulled up diagrams of recovered bullets. Modified hybrid rounds. American precision engineering. Soviet stopping power. But that's not the innovation. Look here. She enlarged an image of a fragment. Tiny surfaces, microcircuits. "Guidance systems," Emma whispered. Her chest tightened. "Miniaturized, adjustable trajectory." Brooks frowned. "Impossible. Once a round leaves the barrel, physics takes over." Emma shook her head. "Not impossible. My grandfather sketched something like this in the 90s. Technology wasn't ready then. It is now. These are smart bullets. They correct mid-flight. Minute adjustments, but at 1,000 yards, a millimeter means life or death." The room fell silent. Even Brooks stopped scoffing. Anderson broke it. "Intelligence suggests Petrov is preparing to auction this technology. The assassinations were demonstrations. The buyers are already circling." Carter leaned back. "So we've got 10 days before these rifles hit the market. That means proliferation. That means hell." Anderson's voice was cold. "Which is why we're here. Sentinel's objective is clear. Analyze, counter, and if necessary, infiltrate. We end Petrov's operation before it begins." He looked at Emma. "And you'll help us find the flaw." Her grandfather's words echoed in her head. "The best shot is the one no one sees coming." Emma straightened, her jaw set. "Then we'd better find it fast." Why did she feel more like an intruder than an asset? The laboratory smelled of steel and solvents, the air cool and sterile under the hum of filtered ventilation. Emma stood at the center of it, surrounded by tables littered with weapon fragments recovered from shadow cell operations. Each shard was carefully labeled, laid out as if waiting for her hands to wake them from silence. Frank Miller moved beside her, arms crossed, his scarred face unreadable. "Welcome to your new office," he said. Emma set her equipment bag on the workstation. Her throat was dry, though she forced her voice steady. "Feels less like an office, more like a confession booth." Frank arched an eyebrow. "Confession." "Every scratch, every alloy mix, every groove in these parts. They tell me what their creator was thinking. If Petrov left his signature here, I'll see it." She slipped into her work the way some people slipped into prayer. Under the digital microscope, the partial firing pin gleamed. She adjusted the magnification until the surface filled her screen. Alloy composition, unfamiliar, reinforced for durability, but precision wasn't sacrificed. That contradiction unsettled her. "Soviets always built for reliability," Frank murmured, peering over her shoulder. "They'd rather a weapon fire under mud and snow than shoot straight as a needle." Emma tapped the screen. "But this doesn't compromise either. Whoever engineered this understood both philosophies. It's balance, not trade-off." Frank frowned. That was always Petrov's dream. Hours passed unnoticed as she traced grooves, cataloged data, and sketched digital reconstructions. By midnight, a shape emerged, a rifle that shouldn't exist, combining Barrett accuracy with microelectronics that defied her instincts. She leaned back, exhaustion tightening her temples. "This isn't just about rifles," she said softly. "It feels like a proof of concept, a step toward something bigger." Frank didn't answer, but the look in his eyes confirmed her fear. The next morning, Emma walked the corridors of sandstone, still tasting the metallic edge of sleep deprivation. She wanted silence, space to think. Instead, she found Scott Brooks waiting for her outside the range elevator, arms crossed, rifle case at his feet. "You've been hiding in the lab," he said. His tone was casual, but the challenge under it was sharp. "Working," Emma corrected. His eyes narrowed, and avoiding the range. Emma sighed. "I don't need to prove myself with a rifle, Brooks." He smirked. "That's what people say when they're afraid to try." The word stung, not because he was right, but because she wasn't sure she could afford to show weakness here. Without replying, she stepped into the elevator. He followed. The range on level 3 was state-of-the-art. Variable distances, moving targets, even environmental simulations. The sterile smell of polymer and gun oil hit her as she entered. Rows of weapons gleamed under perfect light. Brooks opened his rifle case. "You've got the lab. I've got this. Let's see if your grandfather's bloodline means anything." Emma's jaw tightened, but she walked to a rack, choosing a standard-issue M24 sniper rifle. Not the Barrett, not yet. She methodically checked the scope, the bolt, the barrel alignment. Her movements were calm, precise. Ritual. Brooks watched, half bored. "Nice form, textbook." Emma settled into position. Breathe. Aim, squeeze. The first shot cracked, echoing through the chamber. The round tore the center of the target at 300 yards. She cycled the bolt smoothly, fired again, then again, every shot grouping tight. Brooks approached her target sheet, studying the cluster. His eyebrows lifted despite himself. Not bad for a civilian. Emma lowered the rifle and met his eyes. "You mistake restraint for weakness. My grandfather taught me, skill isn't for showing off, it's for responsibility." For the first time, something softened in his expression. Respect, faint but real. He hesitated, then keyed the range controls. Static targets slid away. In their place, human silhouettes appeared, moving unpredictably between covers. "Combat simulation," Brooks explained. "No patterns, no predictability." Emma recognized the test. She took her position again. The first target darted left. She tracked, fired, hit. Another appeared faster, erratic. She adjusted, squeezed, hit. 12 targets in total, she missed only one. When the last target dropped, Brooks exhaled quietly. Impressive, for someone without combat training. Emma safed the rifle and stood. "I'm not a soldier, Brooks. I don't pretend to be. But I understand weapons, how they breathe, how they think. And that's why I'm here." He studied her for a long moment, then unexpectedly nodded. "Fair enough." Days blurred into one another. Emma spent hours in the lab, reconstructing Petrov's weapon from fragments. Each piece was a conversation with the professor across decades. His engineering fingerprints were everywhere, unique tolerances, unusual alloys, design choices that seemed eccentric until she recognized their logic. On the third day, Diane Martinez entered the lab, her tablet glowing with fresh data. "I think I've found something." She set the tablet down, displaying a personnel file written in Russian. Grainy photograph. Intense eyes, severe features. "Dr. Viktor Petrov," Diane explained. "Weapons engineer, Soviet 12th Directorate. Specialized in advanced delivery systems, both conventional and non-conventional." Frank leaned closer, his expression tightening. "That's him, 30 years younger, but him." Emma read the translation. Non-conventional payloads. Her stomach turned cold. "Are we talking about nuclear?" Diane nodded grimly. "Among other things, the Directorate handled the Soviets' most sensitive weapons." Emma's chest tightened. "So the rifles." Frank's voice was grim. The rifles are just the beginning. Petrov always thought in layers. He never built weapons in isolation. They were stepping stones toward something larger. The room fell silent, the weight of that realization pressing on all of them. That evening, Emma returned to the range, this time alone. The quiet steadied her. She selected the Barrett, its weight familiar, comforting. She set up her scope, adjusted, fired. The recoil thundered against her shoulder, grounding her. Shot after shot, she practiced until her body forgot the doubt, until only the mathematics of flight paths remained. She felt her grandfather's presence in every breath. Breathe, aim, squeeze, reset, responsibility. But as she reloaded, she couldn't silence Miller's words from the coffee shop. Your grandfather didn't die in an accident. Petrov silenced him. Each bullet she fired felt less like practice and more like a vow. On the fifth day, Diane burst into the lab, her face pale. Intercepted transmission from the compound. She played the audio, Russian voices, cold and clinical. Preparations for Svarog demonstration are complete. Buyers confirmed. Secondary auction ready. The Americans won't be prepared. Emma froze. Svarog. Diane nodded grimly. Slavic fire god, secondary technology, whatever it is, the rifles are just phase one. Miller's expression hardened. I knew it. The rifles are bait. Petrov's endgame is bigger. Svarog is the real weapon. Emma felt her pulse quicken, and we don't know what it is. Anderson entered then, his voice sharp. We will. Sentinel is shifting to infiltration. We have 4 days. Carson, Miller, you're coming with us. Emma blinked. Into the field. You wanted the full story, Anderson said coldly. Now you'll get it up close. Her grandfather's letter echoed in her mind. Watch your back. She straightened, her voice calm though her chest burned. Then let's finish what he started. Why hadn't anyone told her the truth until now? Emma sat in the dimly lit briefing room, the walls vibrating faintly with the hum of servers buried deep beneath the desert stone. The screen in front of her glowed with a classified file stamped in heavy red. Operation Nightglass, 1992. Anderson's voice was clipped, efficient. You asked for no redactions, Carson. This is the file your clearance unlocks. Read carefully. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the document. Reports, maps, photographs bleached by age, names she didn't recognize, but one line caught her throat like barbed wire. Primary objective, recover prototype sniper platform. Secondary objective, eliminate Dr. Viktor Petrov. And beneath it, handwritten notes in her grandfather's tight scrawl. They've already compromised the program. Someone inside fed him the schematics. Watch for betrayal. Emma pressed her palm against the table to steady herself. She forced her eyes to keep reading. The mission had gone wrong. The team split in two, contact lost in a storm. Hours later, the compound went dark. Explosions, a fire that consumed evidence, and only one survivor retrieved, Colonel Frank Miller. David Carson's body was found 3 days later in a burned-out vehicle outside the perimeter. Cause of death, accidental detonation of munitions during retreat. But even in black and white, Emma could see the gaps. No autopsy photographs, no ballistics report, just a neat closure for the file. Her chest burned. They buried the truth. Miller, standing in the corner, spoke quietly. I told you, David's death didn't add up. He wasn't reckless. He never cut corners. Anderson folded his arms. Officially, it was an accident. Unofficially, he leaned closer. The prototype was never recovered, and intelligence analysts have noted Petrov's current designs are built on concepts from that missing platform. If he took it, if he killed David to silence him, then this has been 30 years in the making. Emma's throat tightened. She remembered her grandfather's steady hand guiding hers at the range, his calm voice repeating the mantra, breathe, aim, squeeze, responsibility. Now she understood why he carried so much weight in silence. He hadn't just been teaching her rifles. He had been preparing her for the burden of unfinished battles. Her voice was low, steady. Then Petrov murdered him, and he's finishing what he started. Anderson didn't correct her. He didn't have to. The next morning, Sentinel gathered in the operations room. The entire team sat around a circular table, the air thick with anticipation. On the central screen, satellite images of the Caucasus compound flickered. Jagged mountains, snow-fed rivers, roads that weren't on any map. Anderson gestured with a laser pointer. This is the facility, built into the mountainside. Heat signatures confirm a full weapons lab. Guard rotations are irregular, suggesting layered security. And here, he circled a section near the northern ridge. Ventilation outflow, our best insertion point. Diane Martinez tapped her tablet, pulling up an overlay. Signals intercept confirms high-level communications. Keywords: Svarog, auction, demonstration. Timeline suggests buyers are arriving within 72 hours. Carter leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Buyers, meaning multiple governments. Not governments, Diane corrected. Private networks, black arms dealers, non-state groups with money and reach. Wilson grunted, the usual devils. Anderson's gaze swept the table. Our mission is infiltration. We insert through the northern ridge. Martinez will hack their systems on site. Brooks covers long range. Carter secures escape routes. Miller and I lead. And Carson, he paused. You'll identify and disable Petrov's prototypes. Quietly, permanently. All eyes shifted to Emma. The outsider, the civilian, the granddaughter of a man who had walked into fire 30 years ago. Her pulse quickened, but she held their stares. If Petrov's weapons are in play, I'll recognize them. I'll dismantle them. But if he's using the prototype from '92, I'll need more than tools. Miller nodded. She'll need time and cover. Anderson gave a single, reluctant nod. She'll have it, but remember, this isn't a proving ground. One mistake and we all pay for it. Later, as they prepared gear, Brooks found Emma in the armory. He leaned against a crate, arms folded. You sure about this? Emma tightened the strap on her pack. You still don't trust me. Trust isn't free in the field, Brooks said evenly. You can shoot, I'll give you that. But Petrov isn't just some ghost with a rifle. He's built a machine around himself. Men like that don't leave gaps. Emma zipped the pack shut, meeting his eyes. Everyone leaves gaps. You just have to know where to look. For a moment, his expression softened. Then he picked up his rifle case and walked away without another word. Night over the Caucasus was ink black, the mountains jagged teeth against a fractured moon. The insertion helicopter skimmed low over the ridges, rotors thundering against the thin air. Inside, Sentinel sat in silence, faces shadowed under night vision rigs. Emma gripped the harness straps, heart hammering. She had trained for this in theory, but theory didn't prepare her for the rush of freezing air, the looming silhouettes of mountains, the knowledge that once they touched down, every step would be in hostile territory. Miller leaned close, his voice a steady anchor. Remember what I told you. Breathe. Focus on the task, not the noise. You don't need to be a soldier. You just need to do what you do best. Emma nodded, gripping the rifle case between her knees. She carried her tools, her scope, and in a hidden compartment her grandfather's journal. His words weighed heavier than any steel. The red light above the hatch flicked green. The helicopter banked sharply. Then the door opened, and cold mountain air roared inside. Go, 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 Anderson barked. One by one, the team fast-roped into darkness, boots crunching snow and rock. Emma followed last, her landing unsteady but safe. The helicopter peeled away, vanishing into the night sky. Silence swallowed them. The climb was brutal. Thin air burned Emma's lungs, her legs screaming against the incline. The others moved with practiced efficiency, their bodies honed by years of combat. She followed, refusing to ask for help, though every muscle begged her to. Halfway up the ridge, Carter paused, raising a fist. The team froze. A guard patrol appeared below, 4 men, rifles slung, flashlights sweeping the rocks. Brooks whispered into his comm, 200 meters, I can take them. Anderson hesitated. No, patrol routes. Missing men will raise alarms, hold position. Emma pressed herself against the cold stone, heart hammering. The guards passed, their voices drifting upward, Russian syllables lost in the wind. When they disappeared, Anderson signaled forward. Minutes later, they reached the outflow vent, a wide grate with warm air spilling into the freezing night. Martinez crouched, pulling out a device. Sparks flared as she cut the grate silently. We've got 30 seconds before thermal sensors reset. Move. One by one, they slipped inside. The tunnels were narrow, hot, reeking of oil and metal. Shadows stretched long under dim red lights. Every sound echoed, the scrape of boots, the clink of gear. Emma followed close behind Miller, her breath shallow. Her fingers brushed the notebook in her pocket, a reminder she wasn't here just for Sentinel. She was here for David Carson, for the truth. They reached a junction. Martinez consulted her scanner. Weapons lab is 2 levels down, security hub 3 corridors east. Anderson nodded. Carter, Brooks east, Martinez with me. Miller, Carson, you're on the lab, quiet entry. Emma froze, just us. Miller gave her a reassuring look. He trusts us to see what others might miss. Anderson's voice was firm. Remember, Carson, identify, disable, nothing else, don't get creative. Emma swallowed hard, understood. The lab was colder than she expected. Rows of workbenches glimmered with half-assembled rifles. Blueprints covered the walls, and in the center, under bright white lights, a weapon sat displayed on a steel frame. Emma's heart stopped. She knew it instantly. Her grandfather's sketches had etched it into her memory. The missing prototype from '92, sleek, balanced, a Barrett reimagined with impossible precision. Petrov hadn't just stolen it, he had perfected it. Her chest tightened. This is it. Miller scanned the room, weapon raised. Do what you came for, I'll cover. Emma approached the rifle slowly, reverently, like touching a ghost. Her hands hovered over it, then moved with purpose. She studied the chamber, the circuitry embedded in the stock, the microgyroscopes hidden in the scope mount. Her voice trembled. He integrated guidance systems directly, not just bullets. The rifle itself calculates corrections. Miller frowned. Can you disable it? Emma's mind raced. Every instinct screamed to dismantle, destroy, erase. But her grandfather's journal whispered otherwise. The best shot is the one no one sees coming. Her eyes darted across the room, landing on a rack of ammunition cases marked with Petrov's insignia. Something in her gut told her the rifles weren't the whole story. She turned back to Miller. Not yet, there's more here, something he's hiding. Miller stepped closer, concern shadowing his eyes. Emma. But before he could finish, the lab's door hissed open. Footsteps, voices, Russian. Emma's blood went cold. She ducked behind the bench, heart racing, as 2 figures entered. One tall, broad, unmistakably military. The other older, stern. His right arm a mechanical prosthetic that gleamed under the lights. Viktor Petrov. Emma clamped her hand over her mouth to silence her breath. Her grandfather's murderer stood not 10 feet away. Why did his presence feel like a weight pressing the air flat? Emma crouched low, barely daring to breathe. Petrov's prosthetic arm caught the sterile light, every movement precise, clinical, almost inhuman. He moved to the prototype rifle, stroking the frame with the reverence of a sculptor admiring his masterpiece. The soldier beside him spoke in clipped Russian. Emma didn't understand every word, but fragments were clear enough. Buyers, demonstration, perfection. Petrov's voice followed, low and deliberate, with the chill of a man who spoke not to persuade but to declare. 30 years, he said in Russian, his tone almost ceremonial. 30 years since the Americans thought they stopped me, but I never stopped. I perfected. And now Svarog will burn their arrogance to ash. Svarog again. The word hammered in Emma's ears. The rifles weren't the end. They were only the opening act. Miller met her eyes from across the workbench, silent but urgent. We need to move. Emma's pulse thundered in her temples. She could leave. They could slip out unseen. But something inside her ached at the thought. Her grandfather's death had lived in the shadows long enough. Petrov was here, breathing the same air, boasting over the weapon he had stolen. Her hand brushed her pocket where the journal rested. One line surfaced in her mind. The best shot is the one no one sees coming. But this wasn't the moment, not yet. Petrov turned sharply as if sensing something. Emma's stomach lurched. But after a pause, he simply barked an order to his guard and strode out of the lab, the soldier trailing behind. The door hissed shut. Silence collapsed in their wake. Miller exhaled slowly. We can't stay here. Emma's fingers tightened on the bench. He's alive. He killed my grandfather and he's alive. I know, Miller said quietly, but vengeance isn't the mission, not tonight. Emma swallowed hard, forcing her legs to move. They slipped back into the corridor, shadows swallowing them once more. Back at the rendezvous point, Anderson's jaw was tight as Miller gave his report. When Emma spoke, her voice was low, urgent. It's not just the rifles. He kept saying Svarog. It sounded bigger, broader. Diane's tablet glowed as she pulled up the intercepted transmission again. Svarog demonstration complete. Buyers confirmed. Secondary auction. She shook her head. We still don't know what it is. Anderson looked at Emma. What did you see in the lab? Emma hesitated. She thought of the guidance systems, the impossibly balanced design, the ammunition cases with Petrov's mark. She wanted to describe everything, every curve of steel, every whisper of circuitry. But her voice thinned to the truth that mattered most. It's my grandfather's prototype. Petrov took it, perfected it. The room stilled. Miller's voice was gravel. That confirms it. He killed David to silence him, and now he's selling his work to the highest bidder. Emma's throat burned. She forced herself to meet Anderson's eyes. You ask me to find the flaw, I will, but Petrov has to be stopped, for good. Anderson's expression softened almost imperceptibly. We stop him by completing the mission. Nothing more, nothing less. The next 48 hours passed in fragments of planning and silence. Sentinel split time between analyzing intercepted signals and rehearsing infiltration routes. Emma drifted between the lab fragments she had recorded and the memory of Petrov's face. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her grandfather instead, his steady gaze, his calm hands guiding her grip on a rifle. On the second night, Brooks found her in the mess hall, staring into a cold cup of coffee. You're not sleeping, he said. Emma smirked faintly. Neither are you. He slid into the seat across from her. I saw you in that lab. When Petrov walked in, you froze. Emma bristled. You'd have done the same if you were staring at the man who killed your family. Brooks didn't flinch. He let the silence settle, then said softly, You held it together. That counts for something. For a moment neither spoke. The walls hummed faintly with the endless machinery of sandstone. Finally, Brooks leaned forward. Listen, out there, hesitation gets people killed, if you're carrying more than you can handle. Emma cut him off, her voice sharp. I can handle it. His eyes searched hers, and for once there was no skepticism in them. Just a soldier gauging the weight someone carried. He nodded slowly. All right, then we'll need you sharp. Petrov's not just building weapons, he's building theater, and theater kills faster than steel. Emma tilted her head. What do you mean? Brooks's voice lowered. He's not just selling rifles, he's selling fear. A demonstration Svarog that terrifies before it even fires. That's how you win buyers, not by proving your weapon works, by proving it makes others powerless. Emma's stomach sank. Fear as a weapon. Petrov wasn't just an engineer, he was a puppeteer. On the third day, Sentinel moved again. The compound was alive with activity. Trucks rolled in, heavy with crates. Guards doubled their rotations. Floodlights cut the snow-choked night. Anderson's voice crackled in Emma's earpiece. Buyers are arriving, eyes up. From their vantage point in the ridge, Emma watched black SUVs crawl up the winding road. Men in tailored coats stepped out, surrounded by escorts. Their accents carried across the cold air. German, Arabic, Mandarin. Each handshake with Petrov was a nail in the coffin of global security. Her fists clenched. They're here to buy my grandfather's legacy. Miller's hand touched her shoulder gently. Not if we stop them. The plan was surgical. Anderson and Carter would create a diversion at the southern perimeter. Martinez would breach the compound systems, cutting cameras for a narrow window. Brooks would cover Overwatch. Emma and Miller would infiltrate the weapons lab again, this time to dismantle the prototypes permanently. 20 minutes, Anderson said. In and out. Petrov can't know what we touched. He can't know we were ever there. Emma's voice was steady, understood. The infiltration was smoother this time. Emma's heart pounded, but her movements were sharper, steadier. They slipped through corridors like shadows. Martinez's voice guided them through blind corners. At the lab, Emma worked quickly. She pulled panels free, her hands steady despite the rush of adrenaline. She slipped microcharges into the circuitry, time to fry the guidance systems without leaving obvious signs of sabotage. But as she worked, something caught her eye, a sealed case tucked beneath the workbench. She pried it open. Inside, not ammunition, not parts. Cylindrical shells lined with microcircuits. Heavy, deadly. Miller leaned over her shoulder, his face grim. What the hell are those? Emma's stomach turned. They're not just rifles, they're payload delivery systems. Miniature drones in bullet form. If these are launched, her voice faltered. Svarog isn't a rifle, it's a swarm. Miller's face hardened. We need to take this to Anderson. Emma nodded, slipping one of the shells into her pack. Proof. But before they could move, alarms erupted. Sirens wailed. Lights blazed red. Martinez's voice screamed in their ears. Compromised, they know someone's inside, extraction now. The corridors exploded with chaos. Guards poured from side tunnels, rifles raised. Emma and Miller sprinted, ducking behind cover as bullets tore concrete. Brooks's rifle cracked from somewhere above, dropping threats before they reached her. Emma's lungs burned. The pack slammed against her back with every step, the stolen shell inside heavy with consequence. Miller pulled her forward, shouting over the din. Don't stop, keep moving. They burst into the ventilation shaft, climbing fast, sirens howling beneath them. The grate ahead glowed faintly with moonlight. Salvation. But just as they reached it, a shadow loomed. The grate yanked free, and standing above them, framed by the frozen night, was Petrov himself. His mechanical arm gleamed. His eyes locked on Emma. And he smiled. The cold air rushed in, searing Emma's lungs as she froze in place. Miller raised his weapon, but Petrov moved first. His prosthetic arm snapped forward with mechanical speed, seizing the barrel and wrenching it aside. The shot went wide, sparks showering against stone. Petrov's voice was calm, almost amused. Carson, I wondered when you would come. Her blood turned to ice. He knew her name. Your grandfather was clever, he said, his accent curling the words. But he underestimated me. I did not expect his little student to appear decades later, carrying his eyes, his stubbornness. Emma's breath caught. You murdered him. Petrov's smile widened, sharp and cruel. Murder? No. He chose his fate. He could have joined me. We could have built the future together, but he clung to old loyalties. Loyalty kills more men than bullets. Her vision blurred with rage. Every instinct screamed to raise her weapon, to fire, to end him. But Miller's grip on her arm held her steady. Not yet. Not here. Petrov's eyes flicked to the pack slung over her shoulder. His smile thinned. "Ah, so you have seen my gift. Good. Tell your masters what you found. Tell them Svarog is awake, and tell them they are too late." With that, he stepped back into the shadows, his guards closing in. Bullets cracked through the shaft. Miller shoved Emma upward. "Move." They scrambled out into the night, sliding down the ridge as explosions thundered behind them. The compound lit with floodlights, alarms echoing across the mountains. Emma clutched the stolen shell tight against her chest. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but one thought drowned everything else. Her grandfather's war was now hers. Why did the stolen shell feel heavier than steel? Emma sat hunched over the workbench back at Sandstone, the cylindrical cartridge cradled under cold fluorescent light. Martinez's tablet streamed live diagnostics while Brooks leaned against the wall, arms folded, his rifle slung loosely but his eyes sharp. The entire team had been on edge since their escape. They had returned alive, but barely, and every one of them knew Petrov had let them go. Emma rotated the cartridge carefully. The microcircuits gleamed, impossibly delicate, etched into the casing like veins. At first glance it looked like ammunition, but inside. She froze. "Martinez," she whispered, "get me a magnification feed now." The screen flared to life, zooming into the shell's inner core. Tiny rotors, microchips, filament-like wings folded into impossibly small compartments. Martinez's face paled. "Oh my God, it's not a round." Emma nodded grimly. "It's a drone, a guided drone disguised as a bullet." Miller's voice came from behind her, gravel steady but strained. Petrov turned ammunition into delivery systems. Anderson entered then, expression like stone. "Explain it to me in plain language." Emma lifted the shell, holding it up under the light. "These aren't just bullets. They launch like standard rounds, but once fired they deploy wings. Micro-drones. Hundreds at a time if fired in clusters. They can be pre-programmed or remotely steered. Each carries a micro-explosive payload." Carter let out a low whistle, a swarm in disguise. "Exactly." Emma's throat tightened. "This is Svarog. It's not about one perfect shot. It's about 1,000 invisible ones moving like smoke, slipping past defenses. You won't see it coming until it detonates inside your perimeter." Anderson's jaw worked. "Rain." Emma exhaled slowly. "Conservative estimate, 10 kilometers, maybe more. Fired from a rifle, it looks like a conventional shot. But what you're actually facing is a swarm you can't predict or intercept. One rifle becomes an airstrike." Silence crushed the room. Finally, Anderson spoke, voice heavy. "If he auctions this, war changes overnight." Emma spent the next 12 hours dissecting the shell. Her hands were steady, but her chest burned with exhaustion and fury. Each micro-component felt like a whisper from Petrov's mind, a puzzle piece that confirmed he had outpaced them for decades. Miller stayed near, silent except for brief questions. Brooks checked in once, offering her a protein bar she barely tasted. Even Martinez, usually animated, seemed subdued, her fingers tapping nervously at her tablet. By dawn, Emma leaned back, rubbing her eyes. "He's using gyroscopic stabilizers with AI microchips. Each drone corrects its flight path midair like a flock of birds. If one is disrupted, the rest adapt instantly." Martinez frowned. "Countermeasures." Emma shook her head. "Traditional jamming won't work. He's layered redundancies. Even if you block GPS, they communicate peer-to-peer, forming their own network. Take down one, the others reroute." Anderson's voice was cold steel. "So we destroy them before they launch." Emma hesitated. Easier said than done. He's got production capacity, prototypes refined, buyers waiting. We can sabotage one lab, but if he's already distributed the schematics. Her words trailed off into a silence. Everyone understood. Later, Emma stood outside, the Nevada desert stretching endless under the morning sun. She let the dry air fill her lungs, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Every part of her wanted to collapse under the weight of it. Petrov had turned her grandfather's stolen work into something monstrous. And worse, he had smiled at her, as if daring her to try and stop him. She closed her eyes and heard her grandfather's voice. Skill without responsibility is just danger given form. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just Sentinel's mission anymore, it was hers. That evening, Sentinel gathered in the briefing room. Anderson's tone was sharper than ever. Satellite confirms Petrov's demonstration will occur in 48 hours. Location: abandoned airfield outside Tbilisi. Multiple inbound flights. Buyers include cartel representatives, rogue state operatives, and at least one private defense contractor. This auction cannot proceed. He looked at each of them in turn. We infiltrate, confirm the demonstration, and destroy the prototypes. Carson will identify weak points. Brooks provides overwatch. Carter manages exfil. Martinez handles comms and electronic disruption. Miller and I lead. We go dark until mission complete. Wilson raised an eyebrow. And if we can't destroy them on sight? Anderson's voice hardened. Then we erase the entire facility. Collateral is not an option. Emma swallowed hard. Erase. That meant people. Not just Petrov's men, but whoever was present, buyers, witnesses, anyone who saw Svarog. Her stomach twisted, but when she met Anderson's eyes, she saw no room for argument. The flight across the Atlantic was long, silent. Emma sat with her journal open, tracing the old poem again. The best shot is the one no one sees coming. She wondered if her grandfather had ever imagined how far that line would stretch, from a single bullet across a desert to 1,000 tiny drones blotting out the future. Brooks sat across from her, polishing his scope. He glanced up once. "You're too quiet." Emma smirked faintly. "Isn't that what you wanted?" He shrugged. "Not tonight." He paused, then added, "You carry his eyes, you know, the same way of seeing, not just targets, patterns." Emma's chest tightened. "That's what scares me. If I see like him, maybe I'll die like him." Brooks studied her for a long moment. Then he said simply, "Not if I've got your back." The airfield was a skeleton under the Georgian night. Concrete cracked and runways lined with rusting hangars. Floodlights cast long shadows across the tarmac where black SUVs lined up like predators. Armed guards patrolled in tight formations, their radios crackling. From their vantage on a distant ridge, Sentinel watched through scopes. "Targets confirmed," Brooks whispered. "Multiple groups, all armed." Martinez's voice was a whisper in their ears. "Signals confirm encrypted uplinks. Petrov's men are transmitting telemetry. This is it." Anderson nodded. "Phase 1, move." They descended into darkness, slipping between abandoned structures, boots silent on cracked pavement. Emma's breath misted in the cold air, her pack heavy with tools. Every step closer tightened the knot in her chest. At the far end of the runway, spotlights flared. And there, under a canvas canopy, stood Petrov. His mechanical arm gleamed. Beside him, on display tables, rows of modified rifles and ammunition crates. The buyers gathered, murmurs low and eager. Emma's pulse raced. This was it. Petrov raised a hand. The murmurs fell silent. His voice carried across the airfield, amplified by hidden speakers. "Gentlemen," he declared, his accent curling each word, "you are here to witness not the future of warfare but the end of your enemies' illusions of safety. Today, Svarog takes flight." He gestured. His men lifted a Barrett prototype onto a firing stand. A crate of ammunition was opened, revealing the swarm shells. Emma's throat constricted. This was her grandfather's stolen dream twisted into nightmare. A guard loaded a shell, chambered it, aimed skyward. Emma whispered into her calm, voice tight, "This is it. He's about to demonstrate." Anderson's voice was calm steel. "Hold position. Wait for the proof." The rifle thundered. A single shot cracked through the night. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the air shimmered. The shell split mid-flight, fragmenting into dozens, then hundreds of tiny glints under the floodlights. Wings unfurled. A swarm of metallic gnats filled the sky, their hum sharp and unnatural. The drones spiraled, regrouped, then streaked downward in coordinated arcs. On the runway, a derelict vehicle erupted into fire as the swarm detonated against it. Then another. The explosions were small, precise, surgical, but the effect was devastating. Within seconds, 3 armored vehicles were shredded, their steel carcasses burning. Gasps rippled through the buyers. Some laughed, delighted. Others simply stared, knowing they were witnessing history rewritten. Emma's breath hitched. It works. Anderson's voice snapped like a whip. Phase 2, Carson, find the flaw now. Her eyes darted, scanning the sky, the debris, the drones. Her grandfather's sketches raced through her mind. Patterns, math, corrections. Then she saw it, a hesitation, a slight delay when one drone adjusted to another's destruction. Milliseconds, barely noticeable, but real. Her pulse surged. They're adaptive but not instantaneous. If you disrupt the network hard enough, they collapse. The best shot isn't at the drones, it's at their brain. Anderson's voice sharpened. Where? Emma's eyes locked on a control tower at the edge of the airfield. Antennas glowed faint red in the dark. There. That's their uplink. Take it out and the swarm dies. Brooks adjusted his scope instantly. On it. Emma's heart raced. The best shot, the one no one saw coming. The retort cracked across the airfield. Why did the silence after the shot feel louder than the rifle's thunder? For half a heartbeat, nothing moved. The swarm hung in the air, its coordinated arcs faltering as if stunned. Then, like a flock struck by lightning, the drones scattered. Some dove, uncontrolled, smashing into the cracked runway. Others spun aimlessly before detonating midair, their explosions erratic, useless. Within seconds, the once perfect swarm was a mess of sparks and falling shrapnel. A ripple of panic surged through the buyers. Some shouted in anger, others hurried toward their vehicles. Petrov's guards barked orders in Russian, rushing to contain the chaos. Anderson's voice snapped in Emma's earpiece. Confirmed, the shot worked. Brooks, good hit. Carson, you were right, uplink disruption crippled them. But Emma wasn't celebrating. Her gaze locked on Petrov. He stood under the floodlights, unmoved, his mechanical arm glinting as his face twisted not with shock but with amusement. He raised his hand for silence, and against all odds the guards obeyed. Even the panicked buyers stilled, drawn by his iron composure. His voice rolled across the airfield, calm and cold. You see, even when disrupted, even when attacked, the system survives. You cannot kill the swarm, you can only slow it. His words dripped poison. He wasn't shaken, he was adapting. Emma's stomach turned cold. He wasn't wrong. The drones had fallen, yes, but not all. A fragment of the swarm had regrouped, circling like predators. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't dead either. Petrov gestured again. A second rifle was brought forward, another shell loaded. The buyers murmured, torn between fear and awe. Emma hissed into the calm. He's going again. We can't just pick off towers all night. Anderson's voice was ice. Agreed, Phase 3, we end this now. Martinez, trigger blackout. Carter, prep exfil. Carson, Miller, sabotage the stockpile. Emma's chest tightened. The stockpile. She'd seen the crates earlier, rows of swarm shells stacked like cordwood. If even one crate left this airfield intact, Petrov's demonstration would be complete. Moving, she whispered. They sprinted low across the dark edges of the runway, shadows dancing under the sporadic explosions. Martinez's voice crackled. Blackout in 3, 2. The floodlights snapped off. The airfield plunged into chaos. Shouts erupted. Guards fumbled for flashlights. Buyers scrambled into vehicles, engines roaring. Emma and Miller slid into the shadows of a hangar. Inside, the crates loomed. Black, stenciled with Petrov's insignia, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Emma knelt, pulling the microcharges from her pack. Her hands worked fast, attaching them to structural points. Each charge small enough to be discreet, strong enough to render the contents useless. She counted under her breath, 1, 2, 3, each word a tether against the panic clawing at her chest. Miller kept watch, rifle steady. "Faster, Emma, we don't have time." "I know," she whispered. Sweat stung her eyes. She pressed the last charge into place, the timer blinking green. Then a voice cut through the dark. "Little Carson." Emma froze. The blood in her veins turned to ice. She turned slowly, and there he was, Petrov, alone, as if he had stepped out of the shadows themselves. His mechanical arm gleamed faint red in the glow of the timer lights. Miller raised his weapon instantly, but Petrov didn't flinch. His gaze never left Emma. "I wondered when you would touch my work," he said softly. His voice carried the weight of 30 years, each word a knife. "Just like your grandfather, always trying to destroy what you do not understand." Emma forced her breath steady. "I understand enough to know you murdered him." For the first time, Petrov's expression shifted. A flicker, not regret, not pride, but something colder. "Murder? No." David Carson chose defiance. "I offered him a place beside me. We could have built this future together, but he refused, so I buried him beneath it." Emma's chest burned. Her hands curled into fists. Petrov stepped closer, his prosthetic hand flexing with a soft whir. "And now here you are, the little shadow he left behind. Do you think you can undo me? Do you think you can kill the future with explosives and childish rage?" Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out. "No, but I can make sure the future doesn't belong to you." His smile sharpened. "Then you will die as he did." The first shot rang out, not his. Miller fired, sparks flashing as Petrov twisted impossibly fast, the round glancing off the metal of his prosthetic. Petrov lunged, his arm striking Miller with bone-crushing force. Miller collapsed, gasping, his rifle skittering across the floor. "Frank!" Emma screamed. Petrov loomed over him, the mechanical hand tightening around Miller's throat. "Old man," he sneered, "always someone else to save you. Tell me, do you think she's strong enough to carry what you never could?" Emma's vision blurred with rage. She grabbed Miller's fallen rifle, snapping it into her shoulder. For a second her hands trembled. She could end him now. Put a round straight through his skull, avenge her grandfather, save Miller. But her eyes flicked to the crates, the charges, the timer lights glowing green. One wrong shot and the whole hangar could ignite prematurely, taking her, Miller, and the proof with it. Her breath shook. Responsibility, her grandfather's voice. Skill without responsibility is just danger given form. She lowered the sights just slightly, aimed at Petrov's arm, not his head, and fired. The shot ripped through the mechanical joint. Sparks exploded. Petrov roared, the grip on Miller breaking as he staggered backward, clutching the ruined prosthetic. Emma rushed to Miller's side, dragging him up. His breathing was ragged but alive. "Go," he rasped. "Finish it." But when Emma looked back, Petrov was gone. The shadows had swallowed him once more. Anderson's voice crackled in her ear. "Extraction point, now we're blown." Emma slung Miller's arm over her shoulder, half carrying him as they stumbled out of the hangar. Behind them, the charges ticked down. They made it halfway across the runway when the first explosion ripped through the night. Fire roared skyward, consuming the crates in a chain reaction. Shockwaves hammered the ground, flames illuminating the chaos of fleeing buyers and scrambling guards. Brooks's rifle barked overhead, covering their retreat. Carter's truck roared into view, skidding to a halt. "Get in." Emma shoved Miller inside, then climbed in after him. The truck fishtailed, tires screaming as they tore down the cracked road. Behind them, the airfield was an inferno, columns of fire clawing at the sky. But even through the flames, Emma swore she saw him. Petrov, standing at the edge of the blaze, his silhouette unbroken, his smile burning brighter than the fire. Hours later, back at Sandstone, silence weighed heavier than any debrief. Miller lay in the infirmary, bruised but alive. Brooks sat sharpening his knife, eyes dark. Martinez buried herself in data, her face pale. Anderson stood before them, his voice clipped. The demonstration is crippled. Buyers scattered, prototypes destroyed. For now, we've stopped the spread. Emma sat apart, her hands clasped tight, the smell of smoke still clinging to her clothes. Her chest ached with a weight she couldn't name. Anderson turned to her. You did what you came to do. Petrov's legacy is shattered. She lifted her eyes, meeting his. No, he's still alive. The words hung like smoke. Everyone knew what they meant. The mission was incomplete. Brooks finally spoke, his voice low. And until he's dead, none of us are safe. Emma said nothing. But in her pocket, her grandfather's journal pressed against her heart, as if reminding her that the story wasn't finished. Why did endings never feel like endings when the enemy still breathed? Emma stood on the sandstone balcony, desert wind cutting sharp across her face. The flames of the airfield still haunted her memory, the smoke, the chaos, Petrov's silhouette unbroken. They had destroyed his stockpile, but his presence still poisoned the air, alive, defiant. Behind her, the infirmary doors hissed open. Miller stepped out slowly, his ribs bandaged, his gait uneven but determined. His eyes carried both pride and sorrow. You saved me, he said softly. Emma turned, her voice flat. I didn't save you, I let him live. Miller shook his head. No, you made a choice. That's what your grandfather always taught. A weapon is only as moral as the hands that use it. You chose responsibility. Emma's chest tightened, but he's still out there, and he knows my name. Miller's silence was answer enough. Within hours, Anderson called the team to the operations room. Martinez stood at the screen, face pale, her tablet glowing with intercepted data. Petrov not running, she said. He's escalating. We cracked fragments of his transmission. Keyword Svarog ascendant, final act, pyre. Anderson folded his arms, his tone grim. He lost the auction, so he's making a statement, a demonstration no one can ignore. The target's not confirmed, but patterns suggest a city, civilian, maximum impact. Emma's throat went dry. He wants revenge, he wants spectacle. Martinez nodded. Telemetry suggests he's mobilizing from a mountain base north of the Black Sea, deep in old Soviet tunnels. If he deploys from there, swarm range covers Istanbul, millions of lives. The room went silent. Anderson's voice broke it. We don't wait. Sentinel deploys tonight. This ends where it should have ended 30 years ago. His eyes cut to Emma. Carson, you don't have to come. Emma stared at him, disbelief tightening her chest. He killed my grandfather. He nearly killed Miller. He turned our weapons into monsters. Don't tell me to stay behind. Anderson's jaw tightened, but he gave a single nod. The flight was long, dark, silent. Over the Black Sea, the moon cast silver across the waves. Emma sat with her grandfather's journal in her lap, tracing the faded lines one last time. Sometimes the best shot is the one no one takes. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She closed it gently, sliding it into her pack. Whatever happened, this was the last page. The mountains loomed black, jagged against the horizon. The insertion was brutal, wind howling, snow stinging. Sentinel moved in silence, weapons ready, boots crunching frost. Martinez guided them with a scanner. Tunnels ahead, old Soviet fortifications, active heat signatures, he's here. The entrance yawned like a wound in the rock. Inside, the air was damp, metallic. The walls bore rusting Soviet insignias, now defaced with Petrov's own mark. Lights flickered. The hum of machinery echoed deeper. Anderson raised a fist. The team halted. Carter, Brooks flank left, Martinez with me. Miller, Carson, your point. Find the control hub, end this. Emma's stomach knotted. Point. The place her grandfather had walked 30 years before. Miller's hand brushed her shoulder. "We do this together." The tunnels twisted like veins, branching into chambers filled with half-assembled rifles, crates of swarm shells, blueprints scrawled in chalk. Emma moved fast, cataloging details, searching for the brain of the operation. Finally, they entered a cavernous chamber. At its center, a launch rack, sleek rifles mounted in sequence, each preloaded with swarm shells. Antennas rose like spines, glowing faint red. Miller swore under his breath. "He's ready to fire." Emma's eyes swept the consoles. Dozens of monitors, lines of code streaming. And there, the central uplink, glowing brighter than the rest. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the hive. Destroy it and the swarm never launches." But before they could move, a voice echoed from the shadows. "Clever little Carson." Emma spun. Petrov stepped into the light, his ruined prosthetic replaced by a newer, deadlier design, armored, sharp-edged, humming with power. His face was carved in stone, his eyes burning with fanatic fire. "You've chased me across decades," he said, his voice smooth, almost admiring. "Your grandfather failed, Miller failed. Do you think you will succeed where they broke?" Emma's pulse pounded. "You murdered him, you twisted his work into this. You don't deserve to speak his name." Petrov's smile was cruel. "On the contrary, without me David Carson is forgotten. Through me his work lives eternal." Miller raised his rifle. "Enough." But Petrov moved with terrifying speed, his arm lashing out, shattering the weapon from Miller's hands. Sparks lit the chamber. Petrov's laugh echoed. "Fight me, little Carson," he taunted. "Prove your bloodline means more than whispers." Emma steadied herself, heart hammering. She could raise her rifle, end it now. A single shot through his chest, but her eyes flicked to the uplink. The hive, the true brain of Svarog. Her grandfather's words thundered in her mind. The best shot is the one no one sees coming. She lowered her rifle, pivoted, and fired not at Petrov but at the glowing core. The round tore through circuits. Sparks exploded. Alarms wailed. The entire chamber shuddered as the uplink collapsed, systems cascading into failure. Petrov roared in fury. "No." He lunged at her, his arms swinging. She dove aside, the strike smashing stone where she had stood. The ground trembled, consoles sparking, flames licking wires. Miller shouted, grabbing her arm. "Emma, we need to go." But Petrov wasn't done. He stalked forward, his arm raised to strike again. His voice was a snarl. "You could have been my heir. Instead, you are his mistake." Emma steadied herself, rifle trembling in her hands. She thought of her grandfather, of weekends at the range, of lessons written in quiet ink, of responsibility. Her voice was steady. "No, I'm his legacy." She fired. The round struck Petrov's arm joint, then his chest. He staggered, shocked, his eyes wide. For the first time, he looked less like a monster and more like a man who realized the future wasn't his. He collapsed to his knees, blood staining the stone. His voice was a rasp, so like him. Then he fell still. Silence echoed louder than the alarms. They ran. The chamber burned behind them, explosions ripping through the tunnels as systems cascaded into collapse. Sentinel regrouped at the extraction point, battered but alive. Carter and Brooks emerged bloodied, Martinez coughing from smoke. Anderson stood tall, eyes sweeping the survivors. "Mission complete," he said, his voice low. "Svarog is finished." No one cheered. No one smiled. The weight of what they had done pressed heavier than the night sky. Back at Sandstone, Emma stood alone in the armory. The Barrett .50 lay on the bench, gleaming under the lights. She disassembled it slowly, her fingers moving with ritual precision. Breathe, clean, respect. Her grandfather's journal lay open beside her, the final page illuminated. She traced the words with quiet reverence. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Her chest tightened, tears stinging her eyes. She whispered into the silence, "I hope I did you proud." The weapon gleamed, the room was still. And in that quiet, Emma felt not victory but peace. Sometimes wars don't end with banners. Sometimes battles don't leave parades. Sometimes the greatest legacy is not in the shots you fire, but the ones you choose not to. Emma Carson walked out of the armory, the weight of rifles and ghosts behind her, her future ahead. And though history might never write her name, the world would breathe easier because of it.